Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next video covering the Avatar Legends RPG new book, The Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide. So this will actually be the last video in this series, and as you can see here, we're going to be covering the final adventure, the fifth of 5 adventures. This one is set in the Korra era, and it's called Discord and Drills. So this one is pretty interesting in that it's a little bit more focused. Again, it's back to being a little bit more action-centric. I would say there's, again, not as many newly introduced characters here that at least are playing a huge role in the story. And I think it's a very fitting story for the Korra era, where we're doing this, of course, generational storytelling. So, of course, as we go into a more technologically advanced era, they do a very interesting thing here where we address one of the very cool lore details from much earlier in the book, which is that in this era, it is discovered that Jasmine Island actually has a rich vein of platinum on it. So now all of a sudden, it's not just the golden jasmine tea that's exclusive to the island. They're also one of the main places in the world where you can theoretically get platinum from that has been sort of not found previously. And so this is where we get introduced to a lot of the big business people coming in to try and take over. And that's where the plot of this one sort of comes about. So, like before, we do have a situation where we use the 2 Korra Legend NPC characters who are introduced in this book. And that, of course, is Korra's father, Tonraq, the chief of the Southern Water Tribe, as well as older Toph. Because, of course, Toph does have a previous Legend NPC bio for her kind of Aang era version, but here is older Toph here, and so the use of these characters I think is nice. It's probably not the most heavy compared to other characters, but it does feel like they are actually involved in this story, which we will get into here, of course. So there's also this image. This is the main other image that they give us in addition to the cover image, which I'll talk about in a second, where of course this is the idea of the drilling. It's the idea that one of these characters, the new introduced character here, the villain, Kun Chen, he has secretly come to the island and started mining like behind the backs of all the leaders of Jasmine Island. He does not have permission to do this, but he's doing it, and he's doing it quickly, and it's playing a bad role on the island. It is risking sort of the future of the island, how aggressive the mining actually is, and you can see here he's facilitating that using mining equipped mecha tanks, which is a very cool thing, and it plays a major part in sort of what the conflict within this story is. When the fighting ends up happening, your group of player characters typically are having to actually fight off against these mining mecha tanks which are being controlled effectively by kind of mercenary kind of miners who have been hired by the kind of villain for this story, Kun Chen. And there's some interesting stuff here, so that's very cool. And then you can see here that the just on the cover, the dock of Jasmine Island is a lot fancier. You can see that since the Aang era and the kind of recovery in a way from the devastation, things have gone well for them now because, of course, as we've gone into this new era, golden jasmine tea has become a big commodity, and they've made their money and have managed to kind of modernize the island. But of course, what's happening here threatens the island. And they actually do some kind of interesting questions as we go to the end of this. So let's go through a lot of that stuff here. So the basic setup for this adventure is that a natural earthquake has taken place. And in an effort to kind of go around the island and explore what the result of this has been, this was where it was discovered that there are now rich veins of platinum on the island that are sort of accessible now. The earthquake has sort of opened up some natural caves, and sort of in a way within these caves you have access to the veins of platinum. So now mining is a possibility, and the information about this has sort of spread around, and so the leadership is deciding what they should do with this. But before that can really be decided upon, a Republic City industrialist, Kun Chen, has decided to just basically, I'll ask for forgiveness later. I'm doing this now. And he's basically stealing the platinum and taking it off island secretly. And the idea of this adventure is that this is where it actually gets discovered, because Toph is here, Tonraq is here, and as we'll see, there is a starting event for this adventure, of course. I'll actually bring up the character list kind of straight away so you have a sense for who we're talking about here. So you can see here, Tonraq's involved, Toph is actually here, but she is just on vacation. So the difference here between it is that Toph just kind of randomly happens to be here because she's decided to, on Iroh's recommendation, finally come here. Like Iroh told her years ago that she should probably go to Jasmine Island at some point. This is the time she's decided to go, and happens to get caught up in an event, because that's sort of that is the kind of unlucky aspect of older Toph. She wants to stay retired, but keeps getting drawn into these things. So, and she's not just going to leave people helpless. So that's how she gets involved. Whereas Tonraq is here on official business to negotiate with Jasmine Island on behalf of the Southern Water Tribe, which historically, as we know from the other adventures, has had probably the best relationship with Jasmine Island. So this is an agreement that needs to be kept up. That's why he's here. But he is also somewhat familiar with Kunshan, because of course he has a lot of experience in Republic City, and Kunshan is a Republic City industrialist, and so he can very much help to give a lot of credence to the idea of, when a suspect comes up as being behind this, it's not just a conspiracy theory against Kunshan. Tonraq believes that he could do this as well. So that's the kind of interesting point there. Otherwise, you can see here, most of the characters involved in this are sort of his bodyguards, his drilling teams, and the mecha tanks are kind of the enemies of this adventure. Then you also have the foreperson of the Golden Leaf tea packing plant, which is important because the thing that basically starts Act 1 is that how this all sort of gets discovered, how the secret gets uncovered, is that effectively there's a kind of cave collapse underneath the packing plant. And so the workers there get trapped in this cave collapse. And from there, this is where Toph comes into play, basically revealing with her seismic sense that, hey, you guys have a ton of tunnels underneath here. Do you know about this? No, we don't. What's going on? And as you go into like Act 2, basically, I believe it is, the mining tunnels get discovered and the action kind of goes into play from there. But we will get to that stuff as we go forward. So we do start with the historical background section here, which effectively just covers that since the Aang era, the council has now been restored, but now there are 5 seats on the council instead of 3. There are also term limits in place and a brand new voting system. So things have definitely evolved going into the Korra era, of course. Jasmine Island has drastically improved in terms of its like structural recovery and infrastructure since the devastation, and it's growing. And as you can see from the cover image, of course, it's doing quite well for itself, while still like being a quite nice natural kind of location as well. The Golden Jasmine tea trade basically is back to being a prized luxury item, and they're making a lot of profit, and this is being used to develop and improve the island. But now the prospect of platinum is bringing other stuff kind of into play here. But also they address stuff that, you know, there is a lot more trade when it comes to like fishing around the island as well. Tourism trade as well. They note that there's a bunch of inns, hotels for visitors on Jasmine Island, and that there is a growing hospitality industry. So as things are becoming more modern, you're seeing all these extra things pop up. A contrast to some of the previous eras where, of course, they were more kind of closed off, but it's very open, of course, in this era. They do highlight that the protectors are much more involved as well, and they've kind of changed from sort of a warrior group to being more of a just general crisis response team where they do emergency rescues as well as potentially any fighting that needs to be done. And they also note that they've borrowed techniques from across the 4 nations and are potentially some of them are advocating that they almost reshape themselves into somewhat of a copy of the Republic City Police Department. So the kind of interesting kind of like old school, just we are a group of protectors who protect the island, to actually almost shape them into a Jasmine Island like defense or police force is an interesting idea as well. But anyway, yeah, the general summary, like I kind of went over, earthquake happens, platinum is discovered. This brings different attention to the island than previously, but kind of much the same. It's just that platinum is a more modern sort of thing that people are after, of course, especially in a more advanced era like the Korra era. And of course, on the market, platinum is a higher value item than jasmine tea, so it highlights the idea of profit. Massive profit could be made, because it's not that jasmine tea is not important anymore, but the platinum is a huge thing these days. So that's the whole situation there. And there's debate, like this is why they do mention the council members here, of they all represent the different opinions on what to do. Should we sell the rights to mining to someone and just allow people to come to the island and mine it? Should we, almost to a certain degree, leave the island, like fully sell everything to these companies and just accept that like we can move on from the island to a certain degree? Should we control it ourselves and do the mining ourselves while also protecting it, or should we just sort of leave it, like just accept that it's here and just do our best to protect the island from outside influences? These are a lot of the different debates that are kind of happening around a lot of this stuff here, which is interesting. But there's been no consensus, and this is where Kun-chan of KN Mining from Republic City comes in, and they say, yeah, he has access to a fleet of drilling mecha, and he has lots of debt. So he has come in and has decided to drill first and ask for forgiveness later. They even described that he comes to the island using submersibles, which is kind of interesting to bring that back up again. And that's how the mecha tanks have come in at night. But they mostly drill during the day, when the hustle and bustle of just the island doing its thing distracts from the drilling kind of vibrations kind of happening more often, the more obscure caves away from the towns, basically. And then they export the platinum at night, and no one has noticed this so far. But it's all happening so quickly and aggressively that it's creating these air-filled voids where there was one solid stone. And so the idea is a collapse is imminent, and this collapse is effectively the starting point for the proper, Act 1 of this adventure overall. I already explained Tonrock and Toph's involvement here. One is for official business as a world leader. The other is just here on vacation. And yeah, once again, it is 3 acts with, of course, a prologue and an epilogue. The prologue is mostly just the protectors, their connection to events and stuff like that. But they also describe the idea of that the backstory could involve the initial earthquake that kind of unearthed the platinum. That also may play an important role in the backstory as well as stuff like sort of Kun-chan coming to the island in the first place. But start of Act 1, a catastrophic cave-in occurs beneath the Golden Leaf tea packing plant. This is why Bina in the character list there is super important, and it gets into what a lot of the actual, minute-to-minute aspect of this adventure actually is. So her 4 workers are missing or trapped in the aftermath of the cave-in. The heroes have to come in immediately, so the player characters have to save the lives of the 2 workers that are right there, able to be rescued from the rubble. But the other 2 are missing beneath what Toph, as she enters the story here, reveals are tunnels under the tea packing plant, because of course this is the reveal that mining work is being done, though of course no one knows the full details about it. These giant tunnels are news to a lot of people, basically. That's the idea here. And again, for context, you can see this is the sort of tunneling we are talking about here. They are pretty giant tunnels that I guess they are not bracing well, they're maybe making too big, they're not thinking about the structure of the island, just profit. So that's that situation there. So yeah, that's effectively the Act 1 is sort of Toph enters, prompts the idea that there are, tunnels. Act 2 is the hero characters going down into the tunnels, Toph sort of holding up the sort of collapsed rubble, allowing the player characters to go underground. And the big thing, of course, here is that once you get far enough into the tunnels, you discover some of the drilling mecha tanks, like I just showed you in the image. And this is where the suspicion properly comes up. And it's also where you save the two other missing workers. So at this point, by the end of Act 2, you have saved the 4 workers from the Golden Leaf tea packing plant, and are now refocusing on why is this here? How has this all happened? Act 3 is that you go back to the surface, and I think they effectively describe that at this point you effectively meet all of the other characters. Like, there's a whole group that is basically all of the council members. Megumi, the leader of the protectors, and Tonraq are all here. You explain what has happened, and based on choices that you've made during Act 2 with regards to how did you defeat the mecha tank that you found, like, do you bring up a piece with you, have you knocked out the pilot, or what, you might immediately prove to everyone. There might be a giant discussion. If the pilot got away, Kun-Chen is going to be warned. If not, he's been unwarned, and the plot plays out differently based on basically what actually happened here. So you might be able to immediately go to a sort of conclusion, or there might be a little bit more of the story left at that point. But either way, the idea is to stop Kun-Chen and his kind of mining guys. Basically, you will have to fight, of course, his bodyguards, the drill teams, as well as the mega tanks, and eventually then deal with the aftermath of this. With the idea of the prospect that they kind of bring up here is that Kun-Chen, if he is allowed to, try to escape, will basically try to bring down the tunnels on purpose. And if he takes down effectively all of the tunnels, he is collapsing a huge portion of the island. Like, it is a near devastation-like thing happening once again that could prompt a decision at the end of the story where you might force the hand of the people on the island that they have to leave. Sell the rights to these companies and leave because so much damage has been done. Or even the idea of, if that doesn't happen, there's the island is still unstable now because there are these giant tunnels underneath it that have not been planned out properly, and so it's a bit of a risky proposition going forward. What if there is another collapse as we go forward? It has kind of a lasting implication on the island overall. So interesting stuff overall. And yeah, they highlight that you can do anything really with the ending of this. They don't seem to overly be committing to what the canonical ending really is to this last adventure. But yeah, the islanders could recommit to the island and their culture, basically try to rebuild. They might try to take the money from investors, leave the island and live somewhere else by kind of splitting the money, or properly just try and go on, not make use of the platinum and just kind of put that to the side. There's a bunch of different kind of outcomes overall to this, effectively. So that's the kind of situation there. Anything else? The workers don't get mentioned as important characters, but they are named in the section going over the collapse in a little bit more detail. So of course the 4-person is Binna, and her 4 workers are Akko, Rin, Mio, and Onyx. So that's interesting. The idea is that the 2 you save immediately are Akko and Rin, and then Mio and Onyx will be the ones who are kind of trapped down there in the tunnels overall. And they'll be the ones that you're trying to find in Act 2. Basically, you discover them along with the mecha tank underground at roughly the same time, but they're injured, of course, and the big thing is protecting them in the middle of all the action, and so on. What else? I think I've covered a lot of the details here, but just going a little bit more in depth. Act 3, the big confrontation is, of course, the big one to talk about here, is at the top of the tunnel when you come back out with everyone. Yeah, you do meet up with, it says here, Binna, Toph, Tonraq, all of the council members, yeah, it's all the council members and Megumi. So there's this giant discussion that can happen here. And so if Kunshan has not been warned by his pilot basically about what happened, he will be there basically as well, and you will have this giant kind of confrontation moment here where effectively it's this almost vote between everyone about, do we believe that Kunshan is behind this or not? And the fight can happen right then and there in terms of resolving things, or it can get a bit messy if he is able to kind of convince people he's not behind it. But this is where Tonraq comes into play quite heavily to kind of lean in the direction of, yeah, he's probably behind it because of what he's experienced with him previously in Republic City. If not, if Kunshan is warned, he will leave and try to start the whole ground collapse situation here. So of course, one situation, the island is going to be a lot more protected than the other, but the result of the drilling has still always happened effectively. But I like the way they set it up here, that if he does try to escape and use the mining crews to collapse the place, it creates this interesting situation where all the characters kind of have to spread out across the island and go to these drill sites to take down a certain amount of like bodyguards, drill teams, and mecha tanks. And they say that, oh yeah, even the Legend NPC characters are going to get involved here. And they say that, Toph can straight away get to one and basically deal with it by herself if given enough time. That's how skilled she is. Tonraq, if you guide him to one, can also do roughly the same thing. Also, Tonraq is one of the only characters present in the story capable of pursuing Kunshan if he actually manages to like escape out to sea. So that's another use for Tonraq. And then, yeah, Megumi and the like other protectors can come into play, and even like the other characters could play some sort of a role in terms of organizing the rest of the island overall. As for like the rest of it, they do go into like that by the end of it. You're effectively making a decision about where to go based on the different council members' view on what to do. So, for instance, Tanuk here says that he's the council member who wants to sell the platinum. It says here, this is all about leaving the island. Collectively sell the rights to the platinum to another industrialist, hopefully someone more scrupulous than Kunshan. Distribute the money to the individual islanders and depart to make a new life elsewhere. Remain and rebuild. This is Chi Zhao, of course, who says there is the voice of safety and caution. Sell the rights to platinum to another industrialist, but remain on the island using it to the money to rebuild the damage, and find a new way to keep the culture alive, basically, even amongst the mining equipment that's going to come in. Remain and control. This is a bunch of different characters. This is Jinlai, Sayo, and also this is Tonraq's view on the situation as well. Retain the rights to the platinum, remain on the island, and work incredibly hard both to rebuild and to construct the island's own infrastructure for mining without ruining the island. So you're in control of it yourself. You're being quite cautious with the mining, but you're still taking advantage of it to help the people. That's what most people seem to believe in. But then two characters also believe in remain and abstain. So retain the rights to the platinum, don't mine it, and commit to kind of a revival of the island as it was in maybe past versions overall. Focus on the jasmine tea, ignore the platinum, build up their own defenses, and that is the view of Megumi and Fu Chun, which kind of makes sense because Megumi has the history as being part of the Protectors, and then Fu Chun is of course a member of one of the main historical clans on the island as well. So, going into like the characters in more detail, once again, it's an example of the Legend NPC characters. It doesn't particularly describe what they're really specifically doing on the island, whereas with Tonraq, it's more of just that it says here. Tonraq also bears a good deal of distrust for figures like Kunshan. His experiences with wealthy industrialists have left him more than a little wary of their motives and behaviors. And yeah, he's here for basically signing new terms between the island and the Southern Water Tribe. With Toph, they again give you the details that Iroh told her about Jasmine Island ages ago, And now she has finally decided to go here before going back to the swamp to kind of settle down once again. But of course, has to help out because of an incident that's actually happening here. And of course, seismic sense plays a big role in terms of discovering the caves. And also she can sense if Kun Chen is lying as well also. Kun Chen himself as the main kind of villain here. Owner of KN Mining, has the fleet of mecha tanks. His company is heavily burdened by debt, and he's desperate for a windfall. And that's where the platinum of Jasmine Island comes into play. He doesn't want to scam anyone out of their money. There's more than just enough platinum to cover his debts and make everyone rich, but he also can't wait for the council's permission. When he realized the effects of his illegal mining, he paid geologists to create reports indicating that the whole island is unstable. So there is also this aspect to it as well, which is that you know, he to a certain degree has made the island unstable, but also keep in mind, an earthquake happened in the first place to unearth the platinum. So there's already this sense of like, even without the excessive mining, the place is a little bit seismically unstable anyway. So might it be the correct choice to leave the island given now that it's even more unstable? But they just add a little bit of nuance to him there of just that it's a matter of timing for him. But he does act too rashly, and he is the enemy of this story, basically. Yeah, the KN bodyguards, of course, they don't really describe that they're benders or anything like this. Like, none of these characters so far are benders here. You have the mecha tanks, and they even give you a little bit of an insight into, hey, you're going to be fighting mecha tanks. Refer to the Republic City rulebook on how to use mecha tanks as part of the story, and it gives you the stuff like, this is the sort of chassis that it uses, this is how much energy it has, these are the modules that this mecha tank is actually made up of, that sort of thing. Binna, who is the foreperson of the Golden Leaf tea packing plant, an advocate for her people. She really cares about getting her workers out of there, of course. Some even note that she might make a good leader for the island and should run to be a future council member. So that's an interesting thing. So a pretty reliable person there. Megumi herself is a firebender and is the leader of the protectors, of course. They note this other detail here, which relates to a couple of characters as well, which is that she's the new leader of the protectors because the previous leader, Kyung, died during the first earthquake, the one that kind of unearthed the platinum and kind of caused this whole incident effectively. She is very devoted to the job, of course, and is doing everything that she can to help. Again, a lot of people agree she is a good leader, but she does feel overwhelmed. They note that her technique is called Wall of Fiery Breath, so I guess she has some sense of maybe a unique fire breathing technique, which is kind of cool. Tanuk is an earthbender, of course, and also one of the council members, and of course very traditional, and is very wary about what's going on here. And I guess because he's an earthbender, he is also very wary of the dangers of geological instability. So interesting stuff there. Fu Chun, again, Fu family is noted once again in this. Preserving the history makes a lot of sense, obviously. Jin Lai, same situation, but feels, hey, maybe the island should change again and switch to platinum being our focus. That's interesting. Qi Zhao, of course, here, and again, she's mainly about safety and really at all costs avoiding another devastation happening to the island. Sayev, they note, is a swordswoman and a former protector, of course. Doesn't trust external voices, wants to keep things internal is the idea there. And then some final little bits of details. Important locations, they note the market square here, which is of course enhanced since the Ang era. The Golden Leaf tea packing plant, which of course is a very modern kind of factory and stuff like that, because of course, you know, this has evolved so much to being a big source of money for the island. There are the drilling sites across the island as well. The docks are quite substantial, as we can see from the cover image here in this era also. And then last thing is just the pre-generated characters, which again, are all meant to be protectors. They do give you some kind of basic backstories connecting the characters to things. Interestingly, in this one, they say one of the characters, Jing, is a technologist who actually designed the drilling mecha, which are now being used by KN Mining, which is an interesting little kind of connection there, which is kind of cool. Hakun, the Bound, actually is another friend of Kyung, the former protector who died. So that's kind of an interesting little detail there. Just highlighting sort of what you can do with your character creation with regards to the characters in this story. You can make these connections to a variety of different things overall. And it's sort of similar with like a lot of the other characters as well, highlighting that some of them are originally like from the Fire Nation or the Earth Kingdom, but then eventually came to settle on Jasmine Island, and they have a connection in that way, that sort of thing. So some interesting stuff there. It's a little bit more to the point, I would say. This one, it doesn't have as much maybe moving parts to it, but I like that it's a nice enough, I think, use for the Legend NPC characters here. I think Toph and Tonraq get to do a pretty solid amount here, whereas in other ones they're very cautious about having those characters ever be involved in the action. Here it seems like, no, Toph is using her seismic sense, both for sensing the geology, but also sensing if people are lying or not. She's involved in action to like hold up the cave, find people, potentially take out a digging site by herself if required. Tonraq is used here also for in a fighting capacity, but also he can pursue the villain out to sea if required, and also take out a drilling site by himself as well. Plus, has a bit of a familiarity with the villain also. That's pretty nice. That's better than some of the other use of Legend NPC characters, which I think is pretty good. And I think it's an effective adventure for the Korra era, is I think the main thing to say here. So that is the discussion on the Avatar Legends RPG, the adventure, Discord and Drills, the last one here. And that is the end of the coverage on this book as well. I'm still waiting for my physical copy to ship. We'll see if I might end up doing a quick video on it when I actually get my physical copy, just because there is the extra item with it, the kind of like the dice thing to roll the dice into, I think it is, dice tray. That might be cool to show off, but you know, I thought it was an interesting book. A little bit disappointing again, just because they added this in to a certain degree instead of the Spirit World book that we were expecting, and they still haven't announced the Spirit World book yet. And now it seems like there's this Kickstarter coming up with Beetle and Grimm for the Roku Voyage of the Unity adventures, and that's a bit of an interesting one where I'm excited to a certain degree, but I'm also a little bit worried that I hope the actual content outside of the physical premium items is more than just directly 5 adventures, in that I hope there maybe is more of an in-depth lore section on the Unity at the start, and that maybe there are a couple of Legend NPC characters as well, that to a certain degree, are they effectively just giving us a Unity-focused adventure guide, or is it just 5 adventures and that's it? I think there is a big difference between those two, but hopefully they do enough to make it interesting, and hopefully we get that Spirit World book sooner rather than later, because I think that's the last big thing that the game needs, is the information on dealing with the spirits and kind of classifying them to a certain degree. But yeah, let me know your thoughts are on what they are on this Korra era adventure, but also what your thoughts were overall on the book. What do you think? How do you think this stood up versus some of the other books we've had? And what do you expect going forward for this game? They seem to have a plan going into the future, potentially involving other avatars. We'll see what exactly that ends up being. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.